I'm delighted to be joined here by my very good friend and fellow Sony artisan, Katrin Eismann, who is internationally known as an author, educator, and just all-around great photographer as well. So Katrin is author of 6 books on retouching, masking, and pretty much everything that you need to know about post-production, and that earned her the title of Photoshop Diva.
Right.
You are the one that I turn to when I've got questions. She got her Master's of Fine Arts from Rochester Institute of Technology, and she now heads up as founder and chair of the Masters in Digital Photography department at the School of Visual Arts here in New York City. It is my great honor to share today with you, my dear.
Thank you very much. So as Brian said, people turn to me for Lightroom and Photoshop information. If I need to know anything Sony, you could go to the Sony website, or you could go to Brian's blog, because it's so up to date, it's so current, it's so real world, so that's where I go. But I'm going to introduce Brian. If you visit his website, he's got a great bio, which I'm not going to read all of, because it's so long, but it just starts off like this. Brian Smith is the luckiest guy on the planet. He won a Pulitzer when he was only 25. He told Bill Gates exactly what to do for an entire hour. He's appeared on The X Factor. He's exhibited at the Library of Congress. He's dined with the president. Not sure which one. He's hung out with
the one we like.
Oh, good. Good. Yes. Yes. We're here in New York. I'm also a little jealous of him. He has imbibed with George Clooney. Was that red wine or tequila?
I think we started with beer, but I think some tequila was involved as well.
And he shared cupcakes with Anne Hathaway, and I can vouch for this. He has married the prettiest woman he's ever laid eyes on. Seriously. Now, Brian is a Sony artist of imagery, a pro photo legend of light, an X-Rite master colorati, and his work has been featured in, Photo District News, Professional Photographer, Communication Arts, After Capture, American Photo, I Need to Inhale, on and on and on. But let me tell you about the Brian that I know.
Uh-oh.
Without the tequila.
Yeah.
No, Brian is smart, generous, curious, detail-oriented, talented, and he sincerely likes people from all walks of life and all different backgrounds and cultures. And this man, you connect with people, and you see that in his portraits. And when I see Brian's portraits, I think of what Edward Steichen said. And he said, a portrait is not made in the camera, but on either side of it. And that's why your portraits connect so well with us. So I'm the one that's honored. I'm the digital tech today. It's a pleasure.
Well, mine as well, right here. Thank you.
Okay. So what we're going to do today, we're going to sort of show how we work. Brian's going to, we can see we have a studio set up here. We're going to go through a few settings on the Sony, what we think makes the Sony really good being in a studio. We're going to shoot captured into Capture One, then we're going to Lightroom, do a little processing, and this is live. I mean, there's no like canned files or demos here. We're just going to actually do and troubleshoot and do the real thing.
Yeah, those 3 things that you never want to do: shoot babies,
yes,
animals, or live. So
exactly. So when my clients ask me, "Oh, you make Lightroom, Photoshop look so easy, can I watch?" I double the rate. Yeah, because it's like, I don't want them to see that. So, Brian, I've been using the A7R3 now for a few months, and there's a number of things I really like about it. And the first thing I really like about it is, this is going to sound, I like the way it feels. It just sits in my hands better than the A7R2.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, if you're familiar with the previous generation, basically same body size, but in order to accommodate the larger battery, the grip is slightly larger. So it's the same size grip as the A9.
Right.
You can't visually see a difference between them, but I agree with you. It's like, I've got big hands and it fits in really nicely as well.
And I like the finish of it. You know, that's really important to me. It's incredibly balanced. Now, when you're in the studio, you know, what features do you think, what do you really rely on when you're shooting portraits?
So a couple improvements for those of you, because it's like you came over from the A7R Mark II
Yep.
as well, right? So I did all 3 generations as my workhorse, the A7R, then the R2, and now the R3. So kind of touching on a couple of the big features for those people who shoot in a studio and work with clients.
Yep.
The biggest change between the cameras is something I've been lobbying for since the original came out, which is a USB 3 Type-C connection. So previous models were a little slow on tethering, and Sony heard that from a lot of people, myself included. And so this is the first of the Sony cameras to feature what I think will be a feature going forward, which is USB 3.1 Type-C connection, which means much faster way to move your files across. I know both of us use Capture One to tether. There's either Capture One or there's Sony's free imaging edge software that you can tether with either one. Capture One to me is just such a nice interface. So even though the raw files are big at 42.4 megapixels, they come across really, really quickly. So that's an improvement that is not one of those things like, you know, not a difference in megapixels or something like that, but in terms of operability, it's a huge difference.
Yeah, it really is, because if you're shooting a studio now, you're going to have a separate monitor, and people are just watching it constantly. You might have seen some of these YouTube videos of people like shooting the 10 frames a second. You know, the models in the studio like waving her hair, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to select 800 pictures.
Yeah.
But if you're doing, I mean, if the person's really moving, if they're an athlete, you know, or jumping or running, that 10 frames a second is really, really great. Yeah,
and the difference between, obviously the A9 came out at 20 frames a second, but the 10 and 20 frames per second are silent shooting mode. So the fastest with the A9 that you can shoot with flash is 5 frames a second. So that is one thing that A7R2 is even ahead of the A9 with, is all the way up to 10 frames a second, you can still shoot with flash. So if you were doing a burst and want to capture every frame, you now can do that. We were talking about tethering. One of the other differences too is now you have more options within tethering, because on previous cameras, as soon as you hooked up a tether connection, all of the images went straight to computer. Now you can select to send them only to computer or save to camera as well, which most of us want for redundancy. It's
instant backup.
You know, you're getting redundancy, and you're saving to a card in camera, which is now up to UHS 2 slot. So that's another improvement. So you saved a card in camera as well as send over. And you can actually select if you're shooting raw, like I'm going to shoot today because that's what I normally always go raw. It's going to, and you set it for camera plus PC. It's going to save a raw file to your SD card, and then it's going to send it over to the computer where Katrin's going to get that image. You could also select, if you prefer, if you have the camera set for raw plus JPEG, you can choose, like if you just want JPEGs to zip over quick so clients give their approvals, but you really don't want to take the time moving the huge files, which move pretty fast, you can select only send the JPEG to PC. I personally am going to stick to a raw workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, has anybody already like crossed their eyes, like, oh my God, so many letters, numbers, and abbreviations? Brian's blog. Okay, whenever I have a question, that's where I would definitely go. So we'll show that before we start shooting. And here's the thing with when you're working with people. There's so much to pay attention to when you're working with a person, like making that person comfortable, looking at their face, thinking of the shot, that you don't want to think about what's going on in the camera. And that, in a way, I sort of want the camera to disappear.
And I think that's one of the really important things that a lot of people miss when they get a new camera is like, you know, you get the camera right before a trip and you take it out and you go like, okay, I'm going to learn this on the fly. Take a little bit of time. I mean, these things are really complex. Sony's done a great job of innovating and adding a ton of new features, but a ton of new features means there's, you know, new stuff in the menu. They've also tried to reorganize the menus as well based on user feedback, but a few things are in different places because of that. Yep. So take the time to get really familiar, no matter what you're shooting. Particularly, I think, though, in terms of portraits or anything that's like fleeting action, street photography, you don't want to be sitting there in the back of your camera going, now where's that setting, when you really need to shoot. And I even though I know most of the stuff in the menu, I keep it amazingly simple. Yes. Like there are a ton of things, but you know, there's some features on that. It's like if you go, when would I ever need to do this? It's like you may not need that. You know, there's a lot of complex features depending on how you shoot. So setting up your camera to make it really simple. Yeah. So as Katrin said, you pay attention to what's going on in front of your camera instead of the back of the camera. Exactly.
So, and we'll go through a few of the settings. Now, the pictures that you see going on behind us, there's a combination of Brian's photos, mine, and you'll see some very creative photos. As I mentioned, I'm the chair of the Master Digital Photography program, and when I knew I was going to be giving this presentation, I was like, let's share the Sony love. So I asked a few of my students if they would like to shoot some portraits under the theme. It's an art school, you have to have a theme, called Distorted Clarity. Meaning, let's do portraits that are a little different. And so one of the students was a Sony shooter, Tenny, she has the A9, so she like fell right into it. And the other two, they used a different camera system. But what they all loved and what they're all impressed by, well, first of all, it was literally like, I helped them set the shot. Here you go, take pictures. It was very transparent. But most of the time, they were working with this new 24-105 lens. And it was like we couldn't zoom in close enough to check the sharpness. And I say, life is too short for soft lenses. Okay? So I know you love that, the 24-70 G Master. I have that too. But for like a nice walk-around studio portrait lens, this 24-105 is sweet.
It's nice to have two good options. Yep. So, I mean, if you want the 2.8 and you want the prettiest bokeh, it's the G Master, the 24-70 2.8 G Master is the way to go. But actually, when I was trying the camera out, I shot a lot with the 24-105, and I think that was, in terms of my readers, that was the #1 requested 100%. Lens, because a lot of people came from other brands that had a 24-105, which Sony didn't have in the FE line, but they listen. There's, you know, they'll never, you know, there might be a couple years in product development, but they're bringing out lenses very quickly now, and I think we're up to 48,
a lot of lenses.
48 lenses right now. Yep. So it continues to grow, and you know, a lot of times I'll recommend, like last year we were we were at Condo 1.0 and got to sit down with Sony engineers, and sort of like, you know, the 24-105 f4 was one of the things that I said a lot of people are requesting, and they kind of nodded at me that they were paying attention, and of course they were working on this lens. It wasn't suddenly they went, oh, Brian suggested it, we need to do it. They'd been working on that lens for a while. Exactly. You know, and it's a case, you're going to see more and more lenses roll out, and the biggest thing that they're looking at is it's not just really to do it quickly, but to do it right. Yep. So the lenses, as they're coming, are in DxO sharpness tests almost across the board sharper than the other brands, but not only sharper, the autofocus is incredibly fast and responsive, so it allows things that we're going to show later, like IAF, which it's possible to enable that with certain DSLR lenses, but not really get the full benefit of it because you're moving big chunks of glass, whereas FE lenses from the start were really designed. In fact, all E-mount lenses, designed at the start for very responsive AF because they use focus by wire. So it's not a lot of stuff to move to be able to jump back really quickly and follow an eye in tracking.
Exactly. And that's, you know, that eye tracking, it works at museums too when you're photographing artwork. It's sort of weird. It's like, whoa. So that is really, really great. I also love the built-in image stabilization. Okay, this is an f4 lens, but I know I practically have another stop.
Yeah, and that's and this lens does have optical stabilization in it. So even on other bodies, you know, like the original A7 series or A6000, this is going to have image stabilization in the lens, but when the body has 5-axis image stabilization, it sort of works between the two. It takes the 2-axis from the lens and then knows to only add the other 3-axis in camera. So you pick up, I don't think there's a spec on exactly how much you pick up, but it's definitely better working with a camera that's got built-in image stabilization.
Absolutely. So Brian, when you meet somebody, or I mean, I know I look around the room and try to figure out who I would like to photograph. But let's say someone gets in contact with you for like an editorial, and they're like, oh, you know, we need a new, like a famous chef.
Yeah.
Like, what is your thought process when someone like calls you, like, and you want to do an interesting portrait, not just like social media headshot?
Well, one of the good things is typically if I'm photographing a chef, the location's probably going to be their restaurant.
Yeah.
So you already have something in the background that says something about that person. I don't have to suddenly location scout. Well, I mean, I do location scout. I get to the restaurant and look for the most interesting spot in the restaurant. If I can, you know, beat the usual cliche of, you know, him standing in the middle of the kitchen, anything that you can do differently that way. It's like sometimes like less is more.
Yeah.
Where like instead of showing everything, it's like you find some weird piece of kitchen thing or the biggest knife they've got.
Yeah.
And you know, just kind of work with that as a graphic imagery. Anything in terms of portraits, if there's something that you can reveal about the person.
I'm interested in hearing about that.
You know, it's like you're looking to kind of see. The obvious of who this person is what they do.
Yeah.
So you're doing that. But if there's a way to kind of bring something else about who they are, like, you know, something that may not be as expected. Same thing with if you're shooting a professional athlete, it's very, like the first thing you think of, let's put them on the court or on the field or something like that. Finding the different spots. Like I remember years ago, I photographed a football player and we were kind of talking. It's like, you know, what do you remember from the early days of football? He's like, running the stadium steps.
Oh,
hated running the stadium steps.
You're like, great.
And it's like, guess where we're going to shoot?
Yeah.
You know, so it's sometimes that little thing, and it's not so much that it's like, oh wow, he's on the stadium steps, but it takes them back to that moment. And you know, I don't really have to like create something in their mind. Sometimes when I've photographed actors, I'll ask them about, you know, what first got them interested in the business, and they might talk about they came to a Broadway play when they were 6 years old, and suddenly it's like now they're thinking about what started their creativity instead of me saying, well, can you look this way and smile a little bit? It's you want to bring that out in the person, and whatever you can do. You know, sometimes you're photographing a CEO and you ask about their grandkids, and suddenly they're not answering questions about their firm anymore. They're thinking, you know, about a happy place. You know, and not that their firm isn't, but you know, just off to something else.
But you see that in their eyes too.
Yeah.
Especially people who've been photographed a lot. You know, they're sort of like, okay, I am a light reflector, and you know, I need to be somewhere else. But if you have that interaction, their eyes get warmer, the smile's authentic. We've all seen those fake smiles. You know, this is a mouth smile. Your face is so complicated. A real smile is going to go in the eyes and all around. And it's completely different. So that's what Brian's really good at, is like bringing out that little hook, you know, to get people to be more authentic. Because a lot of those people that you photograph have been photographed by, you could say, hundreds of photographers.
Yeah. And along those lines, it's like the one thing never say never, because it's like, I say almost never, but I almost never do, is talk about, if you're photographing an actor, talk about their filmography, like run down the list of, oh, you're amazing in this, and like that, because they get hit with that all the time. But I may look for some weird thing that it's like, wow, I never knew Dule Hill loved to tap dance. And now it's like, it might not be the first thing I bring up with him, but we're doing a shoot, and it's sort of like, we do the standard pictures, warm them up, and it's like, is there anything else? It's like, yeah, you got to tell me about tap dancing, and now you're talking about something they're passionate about.
Yeah, I do that in a similar way in the studio. It's like people want to get relaxed. I sort of do the classic shots just to get everybody warmed up, and then it's like, oh, what about this? And they trust you, and then you can do, put bones in their hair and do weird things. So it's sort of, and in a way, people sort of want those traditional shots. And like, okay, you got what you want. Now let's go a step further. Yeah,
or the same way, if you're shooting for client, like, that is probably the one difference between assignment photography versus personal photography, is that the number one person I got to please is my client when I'm on assignment. But that doesn't mean that I can't walk away with a picture that pleases me. So it always starts off with, like, if the client says we need A, B, C, and D, it's we get those pictures, and you make them, you make them as good as you possibly can. But if there's something that was off of their list, you don't go, well, we shot for all the groceries, we're done. It's like you want to walk away in every shoot with a picture that you're really proud of. And whether that was something they asked for or forgot to ask for, or just like, even if they don't use it, they don't run it, it's like you walk away with, like, at least I'm proud of this picture. I did what was expected of me, but I shot one from the heart as well.
Right. And so, I mean, I'm assuming everybody here loves photography and all that, and it's being a professional photographer. I mean, obviously we know it's a lot of work, but you hire a professional because they're going to be able to do it and get it done in the time and be able to repeat. And that's the big difference. I might, I'm doing a lot of personal work, and if it doesn't work out, try again next week.
Well, it's sort of like, in a way, it's kind of like an airline pilot. Like, they've told me, like, it's really easy to fly the plane straight and level. But think of Sully. It's like our job is all like when the birds fly in the engines.
Great.
That's basically the definition of a photo shoot. Like, the more pressure it is, you're going to have a lot more birds flying into the engines. And really, what you've got, when everything is stacked in your favor and goes smoothly, and I've had a lot of those shoots that are just like, anyone could have done this. Everything was good, but it's like those times that the subject hates your idea,
they're late,
they're not getting along with people on set, everything. Suddenly your flash triggers aren't working. It's like that's when you really earn your money and, come through when everything is against you. Yeah, the question for those of you listening online who missed that is like, if you're photographing somebody who comes in, whether they're in a bad mood, hates your idea, is just not getting, you're not getting that interaction, how do you turn the bus around from going over the edge of the cliff to back down the highway again? And that's something that is one of the most important things you can do as a portrait photographer, because you can have the greatest concept in the world and go like, here's what we're going to do. And I've had the subjects go, that sounds like the dumbest photograph I've ever had. Sometimes I've been able to go, well, you know what, I'm probably not explaining it right. Let me show you. And you do a test shot, and I go like, oh, I love it, which kind of tells me I'm horrible with verbal skills. But, then there are other times when it's like, I might have an editor who says, this is what we want them to do. And it, may not be my concept, but I've got to try to sell them on it. And sometimes they hate the idea. So sometimes you have to, you have to be adept to, really turn on the head of a pin. And if like, this is what I'm going to do, and the subject's not going there, it's like, figure out a different direction to go, where maybe let's make pictures like this. And it's amazing when sometimes you do those and they respond well to that and they're good. It's like, then you can get back to what the original concept was. But I've had a lot of times where I spent 2 days coming up with the perfect idea, and the subject walks in and I'm like, not going to do that. It's like, can I show you? No, I hate that.
Oh, God.
And you can go, well, I'm the photographer, this is my idea, and you're not going to get anything. Or you can go, well, let's do this instead. So that's the biggest thing that I would say is like figure out that way to kind of keep things moving forward instead of off the edge of the cliff.
Yep. And the idea of, like, if possible, to collaborate with the subject, involve them too. Because, I mean, how many people really like having their picture taken?
There are a few.
There's a few. We got like 2 or 3 hands.
I don't see the Kardashians in the audience because that would skew things very highly.
That's right. But a lot of people feel, well, me, if someone takes my picture, I'm like, what focal length are you using? And who's going to process that picture? And who's going to retouch it?
Yeah.
So.
Well, some of us just belong behind a camera. We'll say
right.
that. So.
Exactly. So, there's often that level of, anxiety. And our job is sort of like I like making people that look good. There's always an interesting angle or an interesting attribute.
Yeah.
That you can play with light. It can make half the face really dark and really work on like the profile and move around a little bit. And I'm very positive when I'm photographing portraits. I'm like, I talk a lot. Like, oh, this is great. You look great. This is fabulous. You never do, oh my God, these pictures suck.
Well,
because if they suck, guess whose fault it is? Because the person in front of the camera, they want you to have good pictures.
Yeah. I think it really is important to keep that positive feedback sort of thing, and that's actually one reason why, like, unless I've got clients on a shoot, I love the ability to tether, but I'm not necessarily going to tether because the last thing I want is like, somebody's manager or agent in the back of the room looking at the display and like they can be shaking their head over, no, I don't want coffee.
Right.
And the subject looks and it's like, what's wrong? What's wrong with that? What's that way? And it's like, and a good thing I think for every photographer to do is, we both hate it, but to be photographed yourself. Because putting yourself on the other side of things, I had to be photographed for an ad campaign, and I noticed like the people in the back looking at a monitor, like shaking their head, and it's like all I was like focused on was like, it's like, oh my God, I must like be terrible. They're just going, let's like, we'll fix it and retouching. So it's like that bit of distraction. You want to avoid that. It's like. One of the best shoots I had, they stuck me in for a portrait session in like the tiniest room in this mansion, like really like a 9 by 12 foot room, but it was like so small, like the corner they stuck me away in, that it's like, it was really intimate and like none of the hordes could come in the background. So it was like, just like Katrin and myself, it's like we're talking here, everything's dark, and you don't have any distractions. So that's a big thing as well, just to find a way to make it an intimate setting.
Right. So I hope you're enjoying our unrehearsed conversation. And you can tell that Brian and I really admire each other. If you'd like to experience more of this, I'm going to just announce at 1 o'clock. Sony announced a fabulous creative festival, all things Sony.
Yes.
It's going to be in beautiful Monterey, California. I know. Oh, and here we have free housing.
Yeah.
It's called Condo, and they had one last year that was mentioned.
So this is Condo 2.0. Last year, just for Sony Artisans and the collective, as well as our extended family in San Diego, as well as engineers from Japan and marketing from Japan. We had Condo 1.0. This year, they're announcing Condo 2.0, and a portion of the event is now going to be open to the public. So there's a chance for, like, if you go on alphauniverse.com, they'll have something posted with alphauniverse.com/condo trip. And for those of you thinking it's spelled with a C. Condo's actually K-A-N-D-O, Condo Trip. So check that out, and they'll have details of, like, you know, workshops that are possible for those, you know, who want to attend this event. And it'll have all the details in terms of...
It's May 9th through the 12th.
Yeah.
And just sleep ahead of time, because it's morning to night with, like, shooting and workshops and presentations. It's great. And
happy
food.
hour. Yeah.
I think we have a drinking problem.
Yeah, we're not.
Yeah. So
right now.
Anyway, that was literally announced at 1, so you heard it here. Okay, it's going to be really, really great. First week of May. And Gail's daughter lives there, so we can all stay there.
No, it's actually the cost to attend the event includes lodging. So
Yes.
you're going to be, we're all going to be in one beautiful resort. So
Yes.
you'll get a chance to rub elbows with the two of us, because we're both doing workshops, and,
Yep.
and you know, we have relatively soft elbows, so they won't poke you or anything.
Yeah.
But the two of us and other artisans, as well as members of the Alpha Collective, and some of the engineers and marketing people, both from Sony and Japan, who can, you know, who do listen.
They really do.
To your sponsor. I think that's, to me, one of the biggest things Sony has done since the start. It's like, I moved to Sony in 2008, and when I did, they were the only camera brand that really wanted to hear, you know, what they did right, what they did wrong, and, you know, what they need to do next. And what they need to do next is not exactly like, I'm not giving the ideas like, oh, you need to make eye autofocus, because I didn't even think that was possible. It's like, they'll come up with a lot of the stuff on their own, but they do listen to things like, I want a USB 3.1 connection. I want a bigger battery.
I want 2 cards.
2 card slots, yes.
I thought that was huge.
Yeah, a lot of new features. Really, in fact, the majority of new features on A7R Mark II were, you know, generated by user feedback. They threw in some stuff that, you know, they just planned on their own, like, you know, bigger processor and a front-end LSI that was going to happen regardless, but just basically to get the most out of the chip. But they do listen. Now, that's not to say if you had a suggestion and it didn't happen, they didn't listen to you, you got to prioritize. I counted at least 20 improvements. And basically, I'm recommending things other artisans are recommending. They're doing user feedback groups to find out, you know, from both current Sony users and future Sony users, like, what do you really want in a camera, and kind of looking at all this together and figuring out what we can implement. And some things take a lot to implement, and some are simple. So, you know, certainly this is not the end of stuff. They're going to continue to innovate, but they've done a great job of really trying to address the needs of the majority of people out there.
Right. Exactly. And whenever you approach an engineer, you want to be positive and, like, give them some ideas. And then at the end, I always say, well, if it's too hard, and they're like, oh, those are like fighting words. No, seriously. Yeah, I've had a lot of focus groups here in New York City. They come to the school and talk with faculty and students, you know, to learn, and they listen really, really well. So, what do you think we should take some pictures? Yeah,
we can do that. So, we're.
Would you like the camera feed?
Show? Yeah,
all right, we're going to switch so we can see Brian's interface. It's not going to go through all, I'm exaggerating, 648 menus.
No, you're probably low on that number.
I am? Oh my God. But we're going to go through a few of the most important settings for portrait people. So once that turns on, and hit your menu button.
Yes.
And of course it worked when we tested it. Yay!
Yeah, there we go. Oh, look at that. Okay, there we go.
So,
okay, so a lot of stuff, if you're, you know, familiar with the cameras, some of the stuff is just what you remember. I am shooting RAW, as I mentioned before. You know, one thing that came in version 2 of this camera was the choice between compressed and uncompressed. My opinion, I've got, we have a fellow Sony artisan, Thibaut Roland, who does all these like 5-minute exposures and stuff. If you're shooting one image every 5 minutes, I would absolutely go uncompressed. It takes double the space on your card, and you've got, maybe you're not going to get the full 10 frames per second, but you're going to get the very best quality. To my eyes, I've never seen a difference between
I'm with
the
you
two.
on that one.
And it's double the size, and like neither of the two of us are like non-discerning. Like I've really dug into them and I can't see it. It's just, this also was a request from users, is give us uncompressed files. So you want that uncompressed, you've got that option. I'm going to stick to compressed right here.
Yep, me too.
And then one of the things I talked about earlier in terms of, well, let me show you just how you can, I'm going to change this back here. Just like if you did want to split the RAWs and JPEGs, we come down right here to file format, and you have to set it RAW and JPEG, and then if I come over here.
This is for tethered shooting now, this part.
Yeah, for tethered shooting, because we're going to do live. So if we were to come over here under PC remote settings right there, you'll notice USB connection right here is locked on PC remote, because that's what we need to tether right here. But now the remote settings right here, I have this set for saving the still images both to PC and camera. Again, we were talking about that redundancy. You want them in both places. And now one of the new things on this as well is you have the option, if you are shooting RAW plus JPEG, right now the camera is set to save both RAW and JPEG in both places. So it's going to send both over to the PC, and it's going to save both to the card. But you can also choose, this is the PC save image, I could select, I only want to send the JPEG to the computer if I just wanted her to tether really quickly.
Yep.
Like if it's not really for a tech to start working on the images and you just want them to pop up super fast, this will move more quickly. A JPEG just goes over faster.
It's also good for, for like, clients like walking out with something, or if you're also in Capture One, the way you can put in an overlay and keep working.
Right.
Drop in a layout and test things. It's just going to be faster.
Or you could select, for whatever reason, which I'm probably can't think of, is you could save RAW and JPEG to your card and send only the RAWs over. I'm just basically going to come back up in here, and I'm going to come back and get out of this, and we're just going to stick to RAW, because that's obviously Katrin is going to work with the files. That just gives you the most to work with. It's sort of like it's a difference between a digital negative and a print. I know a lot of people, I do get it with a lot of sports photographers who are shooting really fast, shoot JPEG. Those times when you're going to want the most data, it's basically you're going to want RAW all the time.
100%.
So we're sticking to that.
But it's good that you can split them, because obviously just that quick viewing is really great.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, okay, so one of the other differences that you can see real quickly, you'll notice like right in here at the top of the screen, you see there's now, they've grouped things together like movie mode. So we know all of these things are movie related. Right here, we've got the option to either shoot with a mechanical shutter. Mechanical shutter means silent shooting is off. If I turn silent shooting on, that now means I'm using an electronic shutter. So total silence if you're shooting a theater performance, you're shooting at a funeral, you're shooting, that moment of a wedding where you don't want the sound. This shutter is quieter than the previous generation, so it's really, really quiet. But if you want total silence, like you're shooting a backswing on a putt on a golf course and you can't make a sound, you're going to want this on. Though one limiting factor on that is silent shooting mode is basically a video scan, and because of that, with video you can't shoot with flash. So same thing when silent shooting is turned on, you're not going to be able to shoot with flash. And I do have people go, but I want to be really quiet and shoot with flash. And it's like, I think when the flash goes off, that stealth thing is kind of out the window. So, you know, again, this is that, one of the pluses with this is if I choose to, I could shoot 10 frames a second with the mechanical shutter, meaning, again, silent shooting is turned off. A few things right here, it's like probably I should, no, actually, I know I do have it the right way. Release without card is disabled. You have the option, like, I guess it's like if some point you just want to like test something, but it's like basically the images are going nowhere. So I did switch this over. I highly encourage everybody to disable that setting. You do want to enable release without lens because there are certain if you're using a smart adapted lens, it's going to read that. But if you're you're using a passive adapter, like on a manual focus Leica lens or something, there is really no signal coming back to the camera saying, I've got a lens attached. So release without lens, you want to enable. It is by default. Release without card, disable that one. And then you've got all your SteadyShot settings right here. If you're shooting with native lenses or any type of lens on a smart adapter that communicates the focal length to it, like with smart adapters, it basically knows if you're at 24 to 70 zoom, it knows if you're at 24 millimeters or at 50 or whatever. Just leave this on auto. On the other hand, if you're shooting with a Leica lens or some manual focus lens that doesn't communicate all of that data, you're going to want to switch this over, set it for manual, and then set the focal length, which will probably not be 8 millimeters. It's like you want to set that appropriately, and you're actually better off having SteadyShot off than misset. So you don't want to be shooting with that 600 millimeter manual lens with it set for 8 millimeters. But I am shooting with an FE lens, so we're going to take this back to auto. And
my confession is, for me, the simpler the equipment, the better the photographs. I mean, that's why smartphones are so popular, right? It's like you turn it on, you hit the button, and it's sort of like, yeah, I got a picture. So in all honesty, I only use Sony lenses. Because like the adapter thing, and I know there's advantages, but for me personally, I like simple.
Well, I started writing about adapters a lot early because initially like the camera launched with 5 lenses, and so a lot of people were either coming over from other brands or they might have had. A lot of people have reached out to me. It's like, I got my dad's Exacta camera from the 1950s. Is there any adapter that it's like, yeah, there actually is. And it's not, sometimes it's more about the look that way, where you're using an uncoated lens. It's almost like doing Lightroom or Photoshop in camera. It's a different look at capture. But, in terms of operability, there is a lot. I mentioned earlier, the focus by wire just gives more responsive AF. As Sony's filling out the lens lineup, I shoot with third-party lenses much less frequently. So, but one thing that I want to show real quickly is a couple of customization. A lot of people, when you first pick up one of these cameras, you go, there's not many buttons on this. But the cool thing about the buttons they've got is there are 4 custom buttons, as well as a few other things I'm going to show you that you can customize them the way that you want. They're not necessarily like, here's a factory setting to do this. It's like, I don't think like any of the Artisans have things set up exactly the same way, which a lot of times people reach out and go, well, what are your settings? And it's like, well, like what kind of work do you do? Because what I have, my camera program may not be the same as Katrin, and even different types of photography you might want to do things differently. But within this custom setting, it allows you to control pretty much either what the control wheel does or all of the custom buttons. There's 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom that you can control what each of these do. You can even, like on the control wheel, the center button, the left, right, and down, you can control all of those things. You can see it's like I haven't even really set everything right here. But one that I'm going to mention right here, because I'm going to shoot with this today, and this is a really cool thing, is one of the other improvements on A7R Mark II that actually came from the A9 is a much improved eye autofocus. Eye autofocus is not new. It's been on Sony cameras for a while. It initially was AF single only, and then starting with the A7R Mark II, it went to continuous mode. But really until the A9 and now the A7R Mark III, that was not, it's what I say is not really ready for prime time. It was a feature that worked, but like under pressure, it's like it was not as fast as it is right now. Now it's really there, but it goes back to the trick in terms of like, by default, that's hooked to the center button. So as I'm shooting, I've got to both have my finger on the shutter, and then the same hand, my thumb has to be on the center button, turning it on and off. And that's one of those things. It's like if you're one of those people who can walk and chew gum, like I can't, like you can probably figure that out. To me, it's just not intuitive. However, separation of powers, you know, it's a good thing here in the United States, separation of powers. Same thing with cameras, split them apart. And instead, I prefer to enable this setting right here to the,
oopsie, did I lose it?
No, it was me, my fault. Okay, so back here, custom 3. So the focus hold button, I programmed this to eye autofocus. It's not that by default. It's focus lock by default, but like, you know, there's other ways to lock on focus. So I don't do that. I switch it over to eye autofocus. So now, if you can see on both my lens as well as Katrin's, they have this nice little, you know, most of the newer or larger FE lenses have a focus hold button right here. So just pressing this is going to allow me to enable eye autofocus, which, like, to me, that's very easy. As I'm doing a portrait, basically pressing a button right here versus, which of course always makes the menu go away, so I should remember that. But pointing to pressing right there, this goes through. So that's one that I would definitely say, and that's, you know, you were talking earlier about like the native lenses. That's a good thing, which the native lenses have that. That's not going to be possible with adapted because there's no focus hold that really communicates.
And I mean, that's how I hold my camera anyway. I build that natural tripod. My thumb's on that button anyway, so it might as well do something useful. Yeah, and this is another point to bring out too. It's like the way that I'm holding the camera. It's like I hear from a lot of people, it's like, the camera is really small. Do I need a vertical grip to, if I'm shooting with a long lens? It's like, if that's, you know, you certainly can do that. There are vertical grips for these things. But if that's the way you're doing, it probably means you're holding the camera like this. Never want to do that. You always want, like, basically your left hand to support the lens and the body, and this is where most of the weight is. It doesn't matter if I'm shooting with a 500 millimeter f4 lens. It's like, if the weight is in this hand, the right hand is really just to guide things along. So. Cool. So definitely eye focus. We got the lens. We're all set. We're going to start tethering soon. Now, have you noticed a difference with like the A7R2 and this one, like with your portraits and like skin tones or anything? Or is that, what do you think?
Well, I think we were talking about this earlier. So I think one of the points of confusion is the cameras share the same sensor, the same silicon chip. So a lot of people went like, okay, so the files are exactly the same. Well, it's kind of like the taking the same body of the car and putting in a souped up engine. Like, it's the same, but it's not. So what's really changed is the Bion's processor is a newer generation. And then what's added that was not in the A7R Mark II is a front-end LSI. So you've got a new and improved processor and a second processor that work together, which really be able to, it's sort of like turbocharging an engine where now, even though it's the same silicon, it's like, it acts like a totally different chip. And one of the things they did is they improved the color engine, maybe because it's like more processor power working through there, but I've noticed that as well. We were talking, it's like, do they look different? It's like, the color is definitely different. And I think, you know, again, the reason I think it's the processor is this really started with A9, because people remarked about that on the A9 files look amazing for 24 megapixels, and this as well. So it's like the front end LSI, an improved processor engine, you know, it's supercharged everything. So it's like a lot of these things are sort of subtle, but they make a difference in the final image, much more so than, you know, the companies that go from 22 megapixels to 23 megapixels or, you know, little jumps like that are not that noticeable. Having a new processor makes a big difference.
It does. Let's shoot.
Okay. So now we're going to take it away from my menu right there.
So we're
going to hook up here.
Just give us a second to, so we're shooting tethered.
Yes.
Which just means I've created a trip hazard for myself.
Yes.
We're shooting tethered so we can, oh yay, computer. Okay, and Brian, how much have you tested those lights that we have set up?
Not at all. This is sort of like those
Here's
things
our test shots. Look, tethering works.
Yes. For those of you who couldn't make it here to B&H Photo, here's an image of what it does. So we're gonna figure this out on the fly, which you know,
which we're good at.
It's like it's like it may not be pretty at first, but hopefully the plane will land at the end. So so we are tethering, and this is, for those of us like Katrin and myself who are a little clumsy, highly recommended tether tools, tethering cords come in orange because it makes it less likely to trip over.
In a dark studio.
Yeah. So.
And they've just announced.
Yeah, USB-C type cords. So this is USB-C. They basically make them for either to go into the new MacBook Pros like I've got that's got a USB-C connection. It's C to C. For Katrin's, it's C to A. So that the standard USB 3.1, 3.0, 2.0 that you plug into is a male USB-A connection. And they also have this cool little thing that I'll be shooting with today, Tether Tools Tether Block, which kind of holds all the cords here at the bottom, so it doesn't, like, if suddenly you pull on it, you're not pulling out of the port on the camera. You have this holding it in place. They make two different versions. I've got the Arca version, so that basically I know a lot of you have Arca Swiss plate compatible tripod heads, just that quick release. This is basically, you can leave this on all the time, and now we lock into a tripod if we so feel.
Right.
I'm not a big tripod guy most of the time, so I'm going to hand hold, but it's going to hold this in place.
Absolutely. So that's cool.
So we were scouting, we were talking earlier, like the most important thing for any photo shoot is having beautiful people, and we have some beautiful faces in the audience, which are not rehearsed, but you, sir, right there.
Ellis.
With the beautiful Ellis. Yes. Would you be our subject over here? Okay, so just relax. I'm going to set all this stuff up because we weren't on here, so I'm going to bring this power down just a little bit right there. Okay. And Katrin, Phil, as I get this thing together here.
What did you say?
Feel free to fill in like the gaps as I'm doing all this stuff. Okay,
so,
great.
yeah, this is like real life. What I said is like, you know, being there, like, oh, you know, the room, we're sorry about it. And it's like, do you know what kind of ugly rooms Brian's had to work in before? This is like, there's space here.
Very often it's like I don't even have room. I don't even have room for a 9-foot sweep. It's like a lot of times if I've been like I might shoot in a hallway and it's like we're basically cutting a piece of paper off and like taping off a wall. So like this is easy.
Brian's using the 24 to 70 G Master, which for a lot of the portraits he does, like sometimes he wants a little more of the environment in it, like if he's on location. that 24, 35 is going to give him a little more of the environment. Then if he wants to be a little more flattering, which is a portrait, that 70 is going to give him a great option.
Yeah, so it actually, this would be my lens of choice for most of the time with portraits.
Yeah.
You know, just as she said, because a lot of times we were talking earlier, you're photographing a chef, you want to get a little bit of the environment around the person. Could be anywhere, like even as wide. 24 is about as wide as I want to do on a portrait shoot, and when I do that, I'm not doing a headshot at 24.
No, I didn't mean that.
I might be doing a full-length horizontal portrait or a vertical portrait with space around the person. One of the keys when you're shooting really, really wide with people is you don't tilt up or down too much. You sort of stay in the same plane where you can be shooting, you know, fairly wide. I wouldn't say 24 is super wide, but wide enough. I meant
with the environment.
Yeah, and with the environment around the person, and it doesn't give it distortion.
Exactly.
And I just love at 70 millimeters, it gives you're just a little bit more intimate. It's like you're not one of those things like Mike Myers and Austin Powers shouting across the room. Again, what I was saying is like right here, I'm just going to press this button to enable eye autofocus. Good, okay, right there, that's great. Alice, lower your chin just a touch. Right there,
Nice.
Perfect, man. Nice, okay, here we go.
The last time Ellis comes to an event with me, because I volunteer him for the stuff all the time.
Nice, good, okay.
So I don't want to interrupt, but you hear how he's talking a little bit? And because you want to have that connection, which is so important.
Man. Right there. Thanks for doing this, by the way.
Yes.
Thanks for doing this, by the way.
I wish I had shaved better.
Yeah, well, but you'd miss all that handsome.
That's right, that athlete. Look, now, seriously, look at Ellis. I mean, he's run like 20 marathons.
He's great.
You know? I know,
Yeah.
it's like nuts.
Yeah,
He's in better shape than
I walked
anyone
half
else
of
here.
one this week, so.
Yeah. He's in better shape than most people in this room, right? Yeah, I know. Amazing.
Right.
All right, these are cool.
So now, because he's turning this way, I want to see, probably going to bring the light, I'm going to bring the light right over here.
Yeah.
So typically, like, I don't generally broad light somebody, meaning like the side toward the camera, like that's what we're set up right now.
Yeah.
Because you notice it's like basically the light's falling on his ear, and I wanted to give it more depth, so I'm going to grab this. First thing I'm going to do is completely break all safety protocols by taking that off, because I never work with sandbags. There we go.
Even though he's from Florida.
Yeah. There we go. If we're outdoors and it's blowing, but never inside. There we go. Okay. So right there.
So it's just sort of like, this is sort of like, okay, we've got the front, you know, Platon shot, but now it's like, I know Ellis' face will be, he's got so much character that like when someone's standing like this, you know, it's like, I'm at the driver's license place, you know? And so like, I sort of like turning people, because as soon as you turn them, they'll have more weight on one leg, and they turn into more of a sculpture. If you look at the sculptures at the Met, they're always one leg weight.
Lean forward just a little bit, just right there. Okay.
Yeah.
Not quite that much.
I can get a chair in if you need it.
Very good. Yeah, that's good with the shoulder. Yeah. See, notice like even just bringing his hands up here, we got a little more comfortable right there.
Exactly. It's interesting. Even though his body isn't in the shot, by having his hands here, he gets a better stature, you know? And you can really play with that. Because let me zoom out again. Oh, let me go live. Sorry.
And as you notice, as I've got him turned right here, she'll get to it in one sec. So as I've got him turned right here, we have like a near eye and a far eye. The cool thing with this eye autofocus is it actually knows you want to focus on the near eye, because it's like that's one of those things like visually you'll accept if the near eye is in focus and then it falls out of focus. It looks right to you, but if it's the other way around where the near eye's out of focus, it just looks like the picture's not sharp.
All right, so I have a completely blank Lightroom catalog here.
So, but we'll talk through that stuff. So one of the things we weren't demonstrating that is really meant more for architectural shooting, things that are not moving. You could do it inside of a building, something like that, is pixel shift technology. So maybe some of you guys have heard about it. Just explain what it does. is in pixel shift mode with the A7R Mark III. The camera shoots 4 consecutive frames, and between each frame,
You have your card.
between each frame, the camera uses its image stabilization to move 1 pixel at a time. So it basically moves up to the side, down, and back again. So it captures 4 different frames so that I think probably a lot of you know this. It's like normally you've got an RGB mosaicing, and the demosaic sort of takes these pixels that are either red, green, or blue and creates a 4-color image from it. Because this is moving 1 pixel at a time, essentially each pixel is capturing red, green, and blue. Actually, in some cases, green, green, and blue. But the idea is it captures each of the colors as you go across. So if you're doing something like, again, like architecture of a building, it will capture the finest detail, and it will, from everything I've seen, pretty much eliminate any type of moire.
Let's have another shoot.
Okay.
Because they weren't on the card.
They weren't on the card?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so I brought the file into, well, we shot tethered, you saw that, and now I'm in Lightroom, and I quickly picked out the one portrait, and I jumped into the develop module. And what I do is I want to I always check the settings first. So like the first thing I do is I make sure the lens corrections are turned on. You can have this on by default. And even with these great lenses, there's still some slight software correction that Adobe applies. They build very sophisticated 3D camera lens profiles. So you can see the difference here. It's very slight. I turn that on. The next thing I actually check is I check what the camera calibration is, which is a terrible name for, in a way, what kind of processing flavor, what kind of camera profile do I want to apply? The special sauce.
Or seasoning.
Exactly. And we have a number here. They will vary by camera, and they will vary about file format. So if you shoot JPEG, you get nothing. Yeah. All right? So,
which is also true of the camera profile will not apply to JPEG. Sometimes people say it's like it's missing in the profile. If you shoot JPEG, basically Lightroom doesn't know if you've already put a profile in it or not.
Exactly.
So you're basically putting in a cooked meal, going like, reheat this for me, and they're like, no, exactly. you're cooked. So this is strictly a raw thing, which is what both of us believe in here. So
yeah. So when I shoot more landscapes, I'll try different settings, because this, in a way, this gets me closer to the start. All right. And so let's check out what Camera Portrait does. This makes Els look like he just went on vacation or ate a lot of carrots.
Yeah, I would say more of the carrots. So it's like it's adding a lot of warmth to the file. Like I prefer to really stick, personally, the Adobe standard, and then,
exactly. So that
make
looks
the
good.
adjustments outside of that.
But when it's a portrait, we don't need to use the transformations. Okay, the transformations are more when there's more geometric or lines in an image, the architecture, the environmental things, etc. There's nothing here to correct. All right, so I'm going to quickly jump up to basic, all right, and do a quick white balance on his shirt, even though we have the color checker here, but we were so busy being digital tech, I forgot it. Okay, excellent. Now, so here is my basic controls. So to save time, sometimes I will literally see what auto does, okay? And you're like, what, you're a professional and use auto? Yes, because I don't get paid by the click. If I got paid by the click, I would be clicking a lot more, okay?
Yeah, especially if you got paid for Command Zs.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So just for the, in essence of time, because we only have like 10 more minutes. So let's see how he's looking. I see the skin is still a little bit too warm, all right? And now what's interesting is the auto threw in some vibrance. Vibrance is a great way to enhance colors that are not skin tones, but there's no color in here. I'm going to take that down to 0, okay? And saturation, on a person, I don't use it, all right? so we can see what's happening. I've opened
In fact, if you want to make this look like a New York City photo shoot, we want to take vibrance and saturation to like a negative number because that's what everybody does here.
Oh, okay. We're all depressed? Okay. Well, Alice didn't wear black, so obviously it's not in that formula. All right. So I'm going to open up my shadows a little bit more because I want a little bit of shape here. Okay.
And that's actually one of the great things about the dynamic range, which this camera has almost one stop more dynamic range than its predecessor. Again, same silicon, but different processor, is we know that's there. I wasn't using any sort of fill because I know if we want to bring it back, we can capture it.
Exactly. Now, to work on this skin tone here, I do this a lot with people, is I like taking the saturation down a little bit because you don't want people to look like smoked salmon, okay? So I'll take the saturation down just a touch, and lots of times I'll take the luminance up, and it makes them look very light and bright and positive. So if we look at the difference, we can see what's going on, right? Are you okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, good. Now, if I zoom up to 100%, now there's a lot of information there, okay, which I think is just amazing.
So again, we were talking earlier in terms of I was using eye autofocus, and see, you notice it's like tack on the near eye,
Yeah.
as opposed to going for the back eye. So it's smart that way.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to quickly just lay in a little bit of a crop.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, so what I do when I'm processing, and we can check out the detail tab if I go to 100%, all right? I'm going to zoom out first. I like starting with my masking. I hold on the Option-Alt key, and whatever's black will not be sharpened, and then I can zoom up again. And by holding on Option-Alt, you see a black and white picture, which makes it much easier to see your sharpening. And if I turn this on and off, so this is without and with, very subtle. That sharpening should be very subtle.
Yeah.
But even while you were photographing, Ellis, I was thinking, this is a black and white picture.
I tend to agree. So.
Okay, so what I want to do is very quickly make a virtual copy. So Command apostrophe is going to give me like a reference file, not a duplicate file. And I like using virtual
So it doesn't
copies.
take up any more space on your hard drive.
Exactly. So now if I click on black and white, this is your standard default. But once again, I have the TAT tool, the target adjustment tool, where now I'll come back in and let's make his lighten his face up a little bit so he's not too heavy. Okay? And now we can really see, and I'm going to zoom in on his eyes. He's got beautiful eyes, and I can actually just sort of lighten them up a little bit too. And if I close this up, I like comparing them side by side. I'm just going to shift click and hit the N button and then tab, and I can see them side by side. Okay? Then I think black and white many times feels very cold. I would like to add a little bit of tone to the black and white. So I'll make a third virtual copy, Command apostrophe, and come in. I could do my toning either with the split toning, or I could be professional and do it with the curve. All right? So I'm going to, I know, and I'm like, what? There's people watching me. Why are you not showing up? There we go, RGB. Phew. So I think I'm going to warm them up ever so slightly. Up, just a little bit. And I'll take the blues and I'll cool that down ever so slightly. So now you could go, oh, Katrin, that's too much. I have the mouse in my hand. It's right. No, I know. She's like, oh my God, the woman's out of control. Let's take out a little bit of that red. That was a little too much. There we go. Better? Better?
Yes.
Gosh, tough crowd. So now look what we can do. Oop, let's see. And so we can sort of see how cool the neutral looks now? Very cool. Just a little bit. I would obviously work it a little bit more. I think it's too warm, but that would be very straightforward and easy to do if I now come into the basic, all right, and I would go back and then cut down a little bit of that saturation, okay? So this is sort of where you're playing, but I use these virtual copies all the time to just experiment and explore. There, that's better. I mean, there's so many art directors in this room. You're all making me nervous. All right.
And the great thing about the virtual copies is you can jump ahead and basically save your work, and you don't have to undo a lot of states to get back.
Exactly.
You know, if you decided no, I didn't like that. But I think comparison, you can see how good that is to be able to compare 3 versions, because otherwise you're going through history states and like, well, gee, did I like this 20 steps ago?
Yeah,
and so it's a very smart way to do it.
Yeah, and our eyes are human. We're very good at comparing. Okay, we're very bad at remembering. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.